Ethan Kessler awoke to the sensation of cool fingers against his temple. His eyelids fluttered open to reveal a high ceiling of amber crystal that caught light in hypnotic patterns. Disorientation gave way to memory. The research vessel's sudden power failure, the desperate crash landing, the acrid smell of burning circuitry. "You're finally conscious," said a melodic voice beside him. "Your physiology is remarkably resilient." Ethan turned his head to find himself looking into eyes unlike any he'd encountered in his decade as a xenobiologist. They were faceted like gemstones, shifting between violet and indigo as they caught the light. They belonged to a slender humanoid figure with opalescent skin that seemed to pulse with subtle bioluminescence beneath its surface. "Where?" His throat was parched, words difficult. "My research habitat on Nix 9, she replied, offering him a container of clear liquid. "I'm Telari Voss, principal investigator of comparative xenobiology for the Myrian Science Collective." Her long fingers guided the container to his lips. "Your vessel's emergency beacon activated briefly before failing. You're fortunate I was collecting specimens nearby." The liquid was cool and slightly sweet, immediately clearing his mind. Ethan attempted to sit up, feeling a dull ache across his ribs. "Ethan Kessler, xenobiologist with the Terran Science Division. Thank you for saving me." Telleri's expression remained unreadable, but her bioluminescence intensified slightly. "An interesting coincidence. We share similar scientific interests." She helped him sit upright. "Can you stand? I should show you my habitat since you may be here some time." The atmospheric conditions on Nix 9 make communication with passing vessels challenging. With her assistance, Ethan rose unsteadily to his feet. His research jumpsuit had been replaced with a lightweight garment of unfamiliar material that adjusted to his body temperature. Telari led him through curved corridors that appeared to be carved directly into living crystal. The entire structure pulsed with subtle light, giving the impression of being inside a massive organism. "Your home is extraordinary," Ethan murmured, struggling to maintain his professional detachment. The scientist in him wanted to analyze everything. The human in him was simply awestruck. "It's both home and laboratory," Telari explained, her movements fluid and precise. "The crystal formations naturally regulate temperature and filter atmospheric toxins. I've merely adapted what was already perfect." They entered a vast circular chamber where one wall was entirely transparent, revealing a breathtaking vista of jagged crystal formations stretching to a horizon where 3 small moons hung low in a violet sky. "My primary research space," she said, gesturing to various stations filled with equipment both recognizable and utterly alien. "And where we'll diagnose what's required to repair your distress beacon." Ethan noticed something unusual. Subtle force field barriers separated certain areas of the laboratory. Security measures seemed extensive for a remote research station. "You're wondering about my security protocols," Telari said, her faceted eyes studying his expression with unsettling accuracy. "The Myrian Collective guards its research zealously, and some of my specimens are quite valuable." Ethan nodded, though something in her explanation didn't quite align. "Of course. In my experience, the most significant discoveries often happen in isolation." "Indeed," Telari agreed, a slight smile curving her lips. "And isolated we certainly are." She activated a holographic display. "These are the schematics of your vessel based on my scans." The primary communication array suffered critical damage. As they discussed repair possibilities, Ethan found himself distracted by Tellari's presence. Her movements possessed an elegant efficiency, her intellect clearly exceptional. Yet beneath her scientific demeanor, he sensed something carefully controlled, an intensity when she looked at him that seemed more than professional curiosity. That evening, Telari prepared a meal of synthesized proteins calibrated for his human physiology. As they ate in her crystal-domed observatory, watching stellar phenomena dance across the alien sky, Ethan found himself sharing stories of his research expeditions. "Humans are remarkably adaptable," Telari observed, leaning closer. "Your species thrives in environments that would destroy others." "We're persistent," Ethan agreed, acutely aware of her proximity. "Sometimes too stubborn for our own good." Her luminescence pulsed briefly brighter. An admirable quality, persistence. Her hand brushed his as she reached for her drinking vessel. "I believe it will be fascinating to learn more about your adaptability, Ethan Kessler." Later, Alone in the guest chamber Talari had prepared, Ethan noticed the subtle scanning beam that passed over him at regular intervals. He pretended not to see it, maintaining the appearance of exhausted sleep. Whatever Talari's true interest in him might be, he suspected it extended far beyond professional courtesy or scientific collaboration. The question was whether her interest was merely scientific or something more dangerous. Days on Nyx, 9 blended together in a haze of amber light and shadow. Ethan found himself falling into an unexpected rhythm alongside Talari. Their mornings spent attempting repairs on his communication array, afternoons devoted to what she called collaborative research, and evenings passed in conversation that stretched into the late hours. Your species' capacity for adaptation extends beyond the physical, Talari noted on the 7th evening as they shared a meal of cultivated Myrian delicacies she had modified for his physiology. You've adjusted to life here with remarkable ease. Ethan smiled, taking a sip of the fermented nectar she'd offered him. It tasted of distant stars and possibilities. I've had good reason to adjust, he replied, meeting her faceted gaze directly. The bioluminescence beneath her skin pulsed visibly, a reaction he'd begun to recognize as emotional response. Her hand reached across the table, those elegant fingers brushing against his wrist in a touch that lingered beyond scientific curiosity. I find myself increasingly fascinated by you, Ethan Kessler, she admitted, beyond parameters of my research. The intensity in her gemstone eyes made his pulse quicken. I feel the same fascination, he confessed. Later that night, unable to sleep, Ethan carefully examined his quarters. Something had been bothering him since his 3rd day, subtle discrepancies in the room's design. Behind a seemingly ornamental crystal formation, he discovered the first monitoring device, no larger than his thumbnail, emitting regular pulses that corresponded with his heartbeat. Over the next 2 days, he found 7 more, nestled in lighting fixtures, embedded in furniture, even woven into the fabric of his bedding. Each one monitoring a different aspect of his physiology, brain activity, hormone levels, cellular regeneration. He disabled none of them, merely noted their locations, and continued behaving as though ignorant of their presence. On the 10th morning, Talari was unusually quiet as they worked. You seem distracted, Ethan observed carefully. An unexpected variable has emerged in my research, she replied, her luminescence flickering rapidly. It requires recalibration of my approach. That afternoon, she led him to a section of her laboratory he hadn't yet seen, separated by a particularly dense force field. I believe it's time to share more of my work with you, she said, deactivating the barrier with a gesture. The chamber beyond contained a stunning array of biological specimens suspended in preservation fields, tissue samples from what appeared to be hundreds of different species. At the center stood a 3-dimensional model of a DNA sequence that slowly rotated, highlighting specific sections as it turned. This is my life's work, Talari explained, her voice taking on a passionate intensity. A comprehensive comparison of genetic adaptability across known sentient species. Ethan approached the display, his scientific curiosity genuine despite his suspicions. The highlighted segments, they're remarkably similar despite diverse origins. Yes, she confirmed, moving to stand beside him, her shoulder brushing his. They represent what I call survival markers, genetic sequences that enable adaptation to extreme conditions. Her luminescence brightened. Humans possess the most remarkable variation I've ever documented. That evening, their intellectual connection crystallized into something more tangible. As they observed a rare stellar alignment from her observatory dome, Talari's cool fingers interlaced with his. Your species practices physical intimacy as emotional expression, she stated, her scientific tone belied by the intensified glow beneath her skin. We do, Ethan confirmed, turning to face her. Do Marians have similar practices? Her answer came not in words, but in the gentle press of her lips against his, cool at first contact, then warming. Her luminescence pulsed in waves that seemed to flow between them as the kiss deepened. Ethan found himself responding with an intensity that surprised him, his hands tracing the delicate contours of her face. When they parted, her faceted eyes seemed to contain entire galaxies. Our biochemistry is surprisingly compatible, she whispered. That night, alone again, Ethan discovered a new monitoring device beside his bed, one designed to record his dreams. The technological sophistication was far beyond what she had previously revealed. Moving with deliberate care, he extracted a small device from the hidden compartment in his boot. the only possession that had remained with him since the crash. He activated it briefly, sending a compressed burst of data too quick for her systems to detect. The following morning, Tellari greeted him with unexpected vulnerability in her expression. "I must confess something, Ethan," she said, her voice lacking its usual measured control. "My interest in your genetic structure began as purely scientific, but these past days have complicated my objectives." Ethan took her hands in his, feeling the subtle pulse of her bioluminescence against his palms. "Tell me," he encouraged. "What were those original objectives?" Her faceted eyes studied him with painful intensity. "Your genetic structure contains sequences my people have sought for generations. Sequences that could," she hesitated, "restore what was lost to us." "And now?" he asked quietly. Her luminescence flared brightly as she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his in a gesture of surprising intimacy. "Now I find myself torn between duty to my people and what I feel for you." Ethan's arms encircled her, even as his mind calculated precisely what information to reveal and what to withhold. The game they played had become dangerously complex, layers of truth and deception intertwined like the double helix spinning in her laboratory. Sometimes, he murmured against her skin, what begins as deception can become something true. Her luminescence pulsed in a pattern he recognized as agreement, even as he activated his hidden device once more, mapping the entirety of her laboratory security systems with each beat of her alien heart against his. The laboratory door yielded to Ethan's touch at precisely 3:27 local time. Tellari's breathing had deepened into the distinctive pattern of Myrian deep sleep, a state he had carefully observed and documented over their nights together. The security protocols responded to the mimicked biometric signature his device projected, granting him access to the chamber she had never shown him. Beyond the hidden entrance lay a vast space that dwarfed the laboratory she had revealed. Ethan moved silently through rows of equipment that hummed with barely contained power. The scale of her operation was staggering, far beyond the resources of a lone researcher, even one backed by a collective. At the center of the chamber stood a towering structure encased in pulsing energy fields. Within it floated what appeared to be a fragment of technology so ancient it seemed grown rather than constructed. Crystalline components meshed with organic matter in a seamless fusion that defied conventional engineering. "The C-core," Ethan whispered, recognition and confirmation in his voice. Around the artifact, holographic displays showed sequences he recognized immediately, his own DNA, mapped and sectioned, with specific portions highlighted and extracted. Blood samples, tissue cultures, neural scans, all collected during his supposed recovery. Most disturbing were the simulations running on adjacent systems, projections of planetary transformation on a scale that staggered the imagination. He carefully planted 3 microscopic trackers at strategic locations, then extracted sample data from her systems, encrypting it instantly. As he prepared to retreat, a final display caught his attention, a personal log, activated recently. Against better judgment, he accessed it. Tellari's face appeared, her luminescence subdued, faceted eyes troubled. "Subject integration proceeding beyond parameters," her recorded voice stated. "Human genetic key confirmed viable for seed core activation. Extraction process prepared." A pause, her luminescence pulsing erratically. Personal note: finding mission parameters increasingly difficult to maintain. Subject Ethan Kessler demonstrates qualities beyond genetic utility, experiencing conflict between mission objectives and unprecedented emotional responses. The recording continued, documenting her growing personal conflict as their relationship deepened. The final entry, recorded just hours earlier, showed her luminescence flaring with intensity. "I cannot proceed as planned. The collective's directive to sacrifice the human for complete genetic extraction is unacceptable. Must find alternative approach, even if it means." The recording ended abruptly. Ethan stood motionless, absorbing implications. The device in his hand completed its data collection with a subtle vibration. Time to retreat. He returned to his quarters without detection, his mind calculating possibilities with cold precision even as memories of their intimacy burned through his thoughts. Hours later, when Tellari came to him in the artificial dawn, he greeted her with a warmth that wasn't entirely feigned. "I've been thinking about what you told me," he said as they shared the morning meal. "About my genetic structure containing sequences your people need." Her luminescence flickered nervously. "Yes, it's why I initially." She hesitated. Why you saved me, he finished for her. Why you've been studying me so thoroughly. Her faceted eyes couldn't meet his. It began that way, she admitted. The seed core requires specific genetic sequences to activate. Sequences lost to my people generations ago, but preserved in human DNA. The collective identified you as an ideal candidate after analyzing samples from human outposts. My crash wasn't accidental, Ethan stated. Not a question. No, Tellari confirmed, her voice barely audible. Your vessel was redirected. I was tasked with extracting the necessary genetic material and... She faltered. Disposing of the source? Ethan suggested, keeping his tone neutral. Her luminescence flared painfully bright. Yes, that was the directive. Her hands reached for his across the table, cool fingers trembling slightly. But I cannot complete that directive. Not now. Not after. Ethan captured her hands in his. After what, Tellari? After knowing you, she whispered. After experiencing connection beyond scientific parameters. That afternoon, their physical intimacy deepened beyond previous boundaries. Her bioluminescence synchronized with his heartbeat as their bodies joined in a communion of alien biochemistries. Her cool skin warmed against his, luminescence pulsing in waves that matched their shared rhythm. When release came, it manifested as light flowing between them. Her faceted eyes locked with his in a moment of vulnerability neither had anticipated. Afterward, as they lay entwined, Ethan traced patterns across the luminescent contours of her body. Tell me about the seed core, he said quietly. Tell me what it truly does. Tellari's luminescence dimmed to a soft glow. It's the last remnant of ancient technology from our homeworld, Mare Prime. A world rendered uninhabitable in the great stellar flare 3 centuries ago. Her fingers intertwined with his. The seed core contains the complete biological template of our world. Every species, every ecosystem. With the proper genetic key, it can regenerate an entire biosphere. Transforming another world into Mare Prime, Ethan concluded. Yes, we've found a suitable planet. Uninhabited, similar baseline parameters. Her voice grew passionate. My people have existed as nomads, scattered across research stations and temporary settlements. The sea core could give us home again. At what cost? Ethan asked softly. The original genetic extraction process would have killed me. Her luminescence pulsed with distress. The collective deemed it acceptable, one life for the salvation of our species. Her faceted eyes met his directly. I no longer find that calculation acceptable. Ethan pulled her closer, his mind working through implications even as his body responded to her nearness. The trackers he'd planted were transmitting steadily. The encrypted data package was ready for transmission. His mission parameters were clear. Yet as Tellari's cool lips found his again, as her luminescence merged with his warmth, complexity overwhelmed simplicity. His deception and hers had entwined into something neither had anticipated, something genuine growing from seeds of falsehood. Perhaps, he murmured against her skin, there's a solution that serves both our purposes. Her luminescence pulsed questioningly, but his mouth covered hers before she could speak, postponing revelations that would irrevocably change everything between them. The transmission window would open in exactly 7 minutes. Ethan's fingers worked with practiced efficiency, preparing the compressed data package while Tellari conducted her daily systems check in the main laboratory. The hidden transmitter, reassembled from components he'd gradually extracted from his damaged equipment, was calibrated to penetrate the atmospheric interference for precisely 30 seconds. Enough time for a targeted burst transmission to the Terran monitoring satellite he knew orbited the distant gas giant in this system. 6 minutes. He paused, the final encryption sequence incomplete. Images of Tellari cycled through his mind, her faceted eyes watching him with growing trust, her luminescence pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat as they moved together in the darkness, her voice soft as she spoke of her people's generations of homelessness. 5 minutes. The door slid open. Tellari stood in the entrance, her luminescence fluctuating in a pattern he'd never seen, waves of intensity that suggested extreme emotional distress. In her hand, she held his transmitter component. I found this connected to my auxiliary communication array, she said, her voice unnaturally controlled. A rather sophisticated device for a xenobiologist to carry as standard equipment. Ethan straightened slowly, making no attempt to hide the data package displayed on the screen before him. About as sophisticated as the genetic extraction equipment you've been preparing to use on me, he replied evenly. They regarded each other across a chasm suddenly revealed between them. Mutual deception exposed in merciless clarity. "Who are you?" Tellari asked, her luminescence now pulsing rapidly. "Commander Ethan Kessler, Terran Special Intelligence Division," he answered, seeing no point in maintaining the cover now. "Assigned to locate and secure the Myrian terraforming technology known as the Seed Core." Understanding dawned in her faceted eyes. "Your crash was no accident either." "No," he confirmed. "Though your interference with my planned trajectory nearly killed me for real. That wasn't part of my mission parameters. You've been gathering intelligence." "Not a question." "For what purpose?" "The Terran Coalition has been monitoring Myrian research into planet-scale terraforming for years," Ethan explained. "When we detected unusual activity centered on this moon, I was dispatched to investigate. The potential weaponization of technology that can transform an entire planet's biosphere is concerning." 3 minutes. Tellari moved further into the room, her movements carrying the fluid grace he'd come to admire even now. "The Seed Core is not a weapon. It's salvation for my people." "Any technology that can transform a planet can be weaponized," Ethan countered. "A device that could recreate your homeworld could just as easily render Earth uninhabitable." "That was never our intention," Tellari protested, her luminescence flaring. "We seek only to reclaim what was lost to us." "Perhaps not your intention," Ethan acknowledged. "But the Myrian Collective has factions with more aggressive views on interspecies relations. My mission is to ensure the Seed Core technology doesn't fall into those hands." 2 minutes. Tellari's expression shifted subtly. "Your transmission, what does it contain?" "Everything," Ethan admitted. "The Seed Core's location, capabilities, your research data. And," he hesitated, "my recommendation." Her luminescence dimmed. "Which is?" "That we work together to find a solution." The words surprised him even as he spoke them, not the carefully crafted deception he'd planned, but truth emerging unbidden. "The Terran Coalition doesn't want to deny your people a homeworld, Tellari. We want to ensure the technology isn't misused." 1 minute. Tellari moved closer, her faceted eyes studying him with painful intensity. "And us? Was that part of your mission parameters as well? To make me care for you? To make me betray my people's trust for feelings?" Ethan rose, closing the distance between them. "No. That was unexpected." His hand reached for hers, finding it cool but unresisting. "On both sides, I think." 30 seconds. Her luminescence pulsed once, slowly, then stabilized. "Your transmission window is about to open," she said quietly. "Will you send it?" 20 seconds. "That depends," Ethan replied, his fingers intertwining with hers. "On whether we can find a third path, one that serves both our peoples." 10 seconds. Tellari's free hand moved to the console, hovering over the controls that would stop the transmission. "And if we cannot?" 5 seconds. "Then we each complete our missions," Ethan answered honestly. "And whatever has grown between us dies here." The transmission window opened. Neither moved to stop or enable it. "There's something I haven't told you," Tellari said, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of equipment. "The genetic extraction process I've developed. It no longer requires your death. I've found a way to synthesize the required sequences using only tissue samples." Her luminescence pulsed with tentative hope. "It was to be my proposal to the collective, a way to achieve our goal without sacrificing you." The transmission window remained open, data package ready, but unsent. "And there's something I haven't told you," Ethan responded. "My recommendation to the Coalition includes a proposal for a joint Terran-Myrian operation, controlled deployment of the Seed Core technology on a designated world, with safeguards against weaponization." Her faceted eyes widened. "That would directly contravene your mission parameters, as would your modified extraction process," he noted. "It seems we've both allowed personal feelings to influence professional judgment." The transmission window closed, the data package unsent. That night, their coming together held a desperate intensity, the passion of two beings who had glimpsed the abyss of separation and recoiled from it. Tellari's luminescence flared with unprecedented brightness as they moved together, her cool skin warming against his, her faceted eyes never leaving his face as if memorizing every expression. "I never expected this," she whispered against his lips as they lay entwined afterward. "You were supposed to be merely a means to an end." "As were you," Ethan admitted, tracing the patterns of fading luminescence across her shoulder. We were both the pawns of larger forces. And now, she asked, vulnerability naked in her voice. Ethan drew her closer, feeling the double-time beat of her alien heart against his chest. Now we changed the game entirely. His fingers tangled in her silvery hair. Tomorrow, I contact my superiors through official channels. You contact the collective. We bring both sides to the table. They will resist, Tellari warned, her luminescence pulsing with concern. They will, Ethan agreed. But we have leverage they cannot ignore. The seed core, Tellari realized. And more importantly, Ethan added, pressing his lips to her forehead, each other. Their future remained uncertain, balanced on the knife edge of competing interests and ancient mistrust. But as the artificial night deepened around them, as their bodies found each other again in the darkness, one certainty emerged from the tangle of deceptions they had woven. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The Terran diplomatic vessel descended through Nix-9's atmosphere with precise, controlled burns, landing on the designated platform with barely a whisper. Ethan stood beside Tellari, her luminescence pulsing with nervous energy that belied her outwardly calm demeanor. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining in silent reassurance. Diplomatic envoy Parker is reasonable, he murmured. She'll listen. Tellari's faceted eyes reflected the approaching delegation. And Representative Voxtry is less reasonable, but values results above ideology. 6 weeks of careful negotiation had led to this moment, representatives from both sides coming together on neutral ground, drawn by the promise of technology too valuable to abandon and the threat of consequences too severe to ignore. The Myrian vessel had arrived hours earlier, disgorging a delegation of scientists and politicians whose luminescence patterns displayed skepticism and barely concealed hostility. They had sequestered themselves in the prepared chambers, reviewing the proposal Tellari had spent weeks perfecting. Now the human contingent approached, 3 diplomats flanked by security personnel who eyed the crystalline structures with professional wariness. Commander Kessler acknowledged the lead diplomat, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and penetrating eyes. Your reports have been illuminating. Envoy Parker, Ethan replied formally. May I present Principal Researcher Tellari Voss of the Myrian Science Collective? The human diplomat's gaze shifted to Tellari, assessing. Your work on the seed core is unprecedented, Dr. Voss. Though your methods of acquiring human genetic material have raised concerns. Tellari's luminescence flickered briefly before stabilizing. As Commander Kessler's unauthorized intelligence gathering raised concerns among my people. Yet here we stand, seeking synthesis rather than conflict. A hint of a smile touched Parker's lips. Indeed. Shall we join your colleagues? The negotiation chamber had been designed for interspecies dialogue, temperature and atmospheric conditions carefully balanced to accommodate both physiologies. The Myrian delegation rose as they entered, luminescence patterns rippling in complex waves that Ethan had learned to interpret as cautious expectation mixed with ingrained suspicion. The proposal before us is unprecedented, began Representative Voxtry, the senior Myrian official whose luminescence burned with particular intensity. Collaboration on technology the collective has spent generations developing independently. Technology with implications for both our species, countered Parker smoothly. The seed core's capabilities extend beyond merely recreating Murray Prime. Over the next hours, the discussion flowed through technical specifications, security protocols, ethical considerations. Throughout, Ethan and Tellari presented as a united front, their research, conducted over the past weeks, demonstrating the viability of their proposal. The modified genetic sequences, Tellari explained, activating a holographic display that showed the adapted seed core programming, allow for controlled deployment. The terraforming process can be limited to specific parameters, preventing weaponization while still achieving the primary objective. And these safeguards cannot be overridden, questioned Voxtry, his luminescence pulsing skeptically. They're encoded at the quantum level, Ethan confirmed. Any attempt to modify the programming beyond established parameters would render the seed or inert. As the artificial day cycled toward evening, tensions gradually eased. The undeniable logic of collaboration overcame generations of mistrust, humans providing the genetic material and deployment resources, Myrians contributing the ancient technology and scientific expertise. There remains the question of oversight, noted Parker as they approached consensus. The coalition requires verification protocols. As does the collective, countered Voxtry. Tellari's luminescence brightened suddenly. We propose a joint oversight commission. Equal representation, led by two primary liaisons with experience in both human and Myrian scientific protocols. All eyes turned to her, then shifted meaningfully to Ethan. "The two of you," Parker stated, understanding immediately. "We have unique qualifications," Ethan acknowledged, and demonstrated commitment to serving both species' interests. A tense silence followed, broken finally by Voxdry's reluctant luminescent pulse of acceptance. "The collective finds this acceptable, provided regular reports are maintained." "The coalition concurs," Parker agreed. Later, as the diplomatic teams retreated to prepare the formal agreements, Ethan and Tellari stood in her observatory dome, watching the 3 moons of Nix, 9 rise in splendid alignment. "Did you imagine this outcome?" Tellari asked softly, "when you first awoke in my laboratory?" Ethan drew her closer, feeling the now familiar coolness of her skin warming against his. "I imagined several outcomes. None involved rewriting interspecies relations while falling in love with my target." Her luminescence pulsed with pleasure at his words. "Love," she repeated, the human concept still novel on her lips. "A chemical reaction your poets have mythologized for millennia," says the scientist who monitors my serotonin levels while we make love, Ethan teased, tracing the luminescent patterns along her shoulder. "Purely for research purposes," she countered, her faceted eyes sparkling with humor. Her expression sobered slightly. "The world we've chosen for transformation, it will not be precisely like Mirae Prime. Some compromises were necessary in the programming." "A new world," Ethan suggested, "for a new beginning. Neither fully human nor fully Myrian, but a synthesis." "Like us," Tellari observed, her hand finding the center of his chest where his heart beat steadily beneath her touch. 3 months later, they stood together on the observation deck of the joint mission vessel, watching as the seed core initiated its carefully controlled sequence on the designated planet below. Streams of luminescent energy spiraled across the barren surface, following programmed patterns developed through their combined research. First-stage cellular propagation proceeding exactly as modeled, Tellari reported, her scientific precision undiminished by the wonder in her faceted eyes. "Environmental parameters stabilizing within acceptable ranges," Ethan confirmed, monitoring the cascading data on adjacent displays. Around them, the mixed crew of human and Myrian scientists worked in coordinated harmony, the first of many such collaborations their agreement had fostered. The initial suspicion had given way to professional respect, and in some cases, genuine camaraderie. As the transformation below continued its prescribed course, Ethan's hand found Tellari's, their fingers intertwining in what had become their most natural gesture. Her luminescence synchronized with his pulse in the way that still fascinated the researchers studying their unique biochemical compatibility. "We should inspect the primary deployment site," Tellari suggested, her professional tone belied by the specific pattern of luminescence that Ethan had come to recognize as desire. "The deployment requires at least 6 hours before initial assessment is possible," he replied, matching her ostensibly professional demeanor while his thumb traced intimate patterns across her wrist. "Precisely. Sufficient time for thorough preparation." Their quarters aboard the science vessel merged their distinct physiological needs, areas of crystalline resonance for her, interspersed with the warmer environments he required. The space reflected their relationship, neither fully adapting to the other, but rather creating something new that accommodated both. Later, as they lay entwined, her luminescence pulsing in satiated rhythms against his skin, Ethan reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them here. From mutual deception to genuine connection, from opposing missions to shared purpose. "The Sea-Core transforms barren worlds into living ecosystems," Tellari murmured against his chest. "But it was you who transformed my understanding of purpose." Ethan's fingers traced the intricate patterns of her luminescence, now as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. "We transformed each other," he corrected gently, "from weapons of our respective sides into something neither could have anticipated." Below them, a new world took shape, neither Earth nor Mirae Prime, but something unique born from the genetic heritage of both. Above, among the stars, 2 beings from worlds that might have been enemies held each other, their union as unexpected and miraculous as the synthesis they had created. "The collective believes transformation requires perfect conditions," Tellari whispered, her faceted eyes holding his in the dimness. "But I've learned that the most profound transformations arise from imperfect circumstances, from deception that becomes truth, from mission parameters that yield to deeper imperatives. From enemies who become lovers, Ethan added, drawing her closer. Her luminescence pulsed in agreement as they drifted into sleep, monitoring equipment around them recording the synchronized patterns of their disparate physiologies finding harmony. Data that would eventually form the foundation for understanding between their worlds, just as their bodies had formed the template for something neither species had imagined possible. Beyond the viewport, the new world continued its transformation, one cell at a time, a testament to what becomes possible when ancient barriers yield to newly discovered truths.